What's up, Crim Heist? Welcome to another criminology educational video. And for today, we will be discussing fundamentals of criminal investigation and intelligence. Before we start our discussion, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the professor and hit the notification bell for you to be updated for my next upload. So first on our list, we will be discussing the 6 cardinal points of investigation. The 6 cardinal points of investigation is the 5W and 1H. So, to be more specific, the 5W and 1H are the following: what, where, when, whom, why, and how. So, ano yung mga suggested questions in the 5W and 1H? So, first is, what specific offense has been committed? So, ano pwedeng isagot dyan or masagot dyan? Ang pwedeng masagot dyan is, what is the nature of crime committed? Next is where. Pwede nating malaman dito yung place or location of the crime committed or place or location kung saan nangyari yung krimen. Next is when. When it was committed, the time and date of the crime. Next is whom. Whom it was committed. So who are the persons involved, the crimes, the victims, and the witnesses. The next one would be why. Why it was committed. What is the reason or the motive of the criminal or the offender in doing such crime or in doing or in perpetrating such offense. And the last one would be the 1H, which is how. How it was committed. What is the manner or the modus operandi of the perpetrator. So just to give you an idea, ito yung mga specific questions or mga suggested questions na maaari nating itanong in the 5W and 1H. So for who, pwede nating itanong dito is who reported the crime and who discovered the crime, who saw how the crime was committed, who is the victim, who had any misunderstanding with him or her, who is the offender, perpetrator, or culprit, who are the companions, associates, or accomplices of the perpetrator. For what happened? What specific actions did the suspect or victims or witness do? What is the nature of the crime? What were the weapons or tools used by the perpetrator or culprit? What were the pieces of evidence discovered at the crime scene? For where was the crime discovered? Where did the offense take place? Where are the victims, witnesses, or culprits? Where the victims, witnesses, culprits live? Where was the suspect when he was apprehended? Where were the weapons or tools used in committing the crime? Where did the investigator secure or obtain the evidence? And for the question when was the crime committed? When was it discovered? When was the police notified? When was the victim last seen? When was the suspect arrested? For the question why did the offender do it? Why did he kill a victim? Why didn't he just let the victim go? Why didn't the suspect surrender? And for the question how did the suspect get near to the victim? How did he perform the crime? How did the criminal get all the necessary information? How did the criminal get away from the crime scene? How was the crime search conducted? Next would be the purposes of 5W and 1H, or what are the purposes of the 6 cardinal points of investigation. So first would be aid the investigator in searching the crime scene or other places which may be sources of evidence. Guide the investigator in formulating questions in interviewing process to the complainant, witnesses, and other interested parties, or in the process of interrogating a suspect. Of course, in the 6 cardinal points of investigation, it gives you the essential information about the crime. What are the facts and circumstances na nangyari sa krimen. So therefore, if you have the facts and circumstances, maari ka or mas mapapadali makapag-formulate ka ng mga tanong for interview or interrogating purposes. Assist investigator and the desk officer in making brief statements of facts in the logbook, police blotter, and in our reports. Of course, if you have the essential information or the facts and circumstances na nangyari sa krimen, you can easily formulate or you can easily construct a brief and concise statement for your reports. Help the investigator in preparing the modus operandi report or how was the crime perpetrated. So kung paano ginawa or what is the manner of the offender in doing or perpetrating the crime. Assist the investigator in furnishing a brief and concise criminal investigation report. Next would be golden rule in criminal investigation. Never touch, alter, move, or transfer any object at the crime scene unless it is properly marked, measured, sketched, and or photographed. So bakit meron tong purpose or anong purpose ng rule na to rather? It is to avoid mutilation, alteration, and contamination of the pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. So not unless it is properly marked, measured, sketched, or photographed, or recorded in its general term, hindi mo siya pwedeng galawin or i-alter or i-move because that may affect your investigation. Next would be methods of recording the investigation. So, nandyan si notes, sketching, plaster cast, developing and lifting latent prints found at the crime scene, videotape recording, statement of victims and witnesses through interview, tape recording, and collection of physical evidence. And of course, the last one would be photographs. Next would be tools in criminal investigation. So, just to give you a heads up, there are 3 I's of investigation. First would be information. So for information, it refers to the information needed in the course of investigation. It is the knowledge which an investigator acquired from other persons and records. This will aid the investigators to gather facts necessary to solve cases as this is considered as the lifeblood and essence of investigation. So, what are the classes of information na maaaring makuha ni investigator? Nandyan si regular source, si cultivated source, and grapevine sources. So, para mas maging madali, regular sources, these are information na maaaring makuha natin from the files or records ng mga government and non-government agencies. So, when we say regular sources, these are information that are readily available for public purposes or for public viewing. While cultivated sources, these are information which is upon the initiative of the investigator. So, meron ng effort na in-exert si investigator para makuha yung information na yon. Unlike a regular source, it is readily available to the public. The last one is grapevine sources. When we say grapevine sources, these are information coming from the underworld characters such as prisoners or mga ex-convicts. Next would be interview. Interview is a conversation with a purpose motivated by a desire to obtain certain information from the person being interviewed as to what was done, seen, felt, heard, tasted, smelled, or known. This is the questioning of a person believed to possesses knowledge that is in official interest of the investigator. So, si interviewer, siya yung nagtatanong or nagko-conduct ng interview. Si interviewee, siya yung respondent or the person being interviewed. Suspect, any person associated to the commission of crime. And witness, a person other than the suspect who is requested to give information concerning an occurrence. So, for interview, these are just simple questioning to obtain knowledge or information that can be helpful or that can be used by the investigator in investigating the crime. Unlike yung interrogation kasi, si interrogation kasi, it is more of questioning of a respondent or a reluctant respondent, which we will be discussing later on. So for interview, nandito ang tinatawag natin na ironic format or the approach na maaring gamitin ni interviewer kay interviewee. So first is identity. So you have to identify yourself prior to the start of your interview. Identify yourself by stating your name, rank, and agency. Next is rapport. You have to build a good relationship or you have to show to the interviewee that you are trustworthy para makapagbigay siya ng information ng maayos. Next is opening statement. So you have to indicate or you have to inform your interviewee kung bakit siya ini-interview. Next is narration. So, if the witness should be allowed to tell all he knows with little interruptions from the investigator. So, once na tumuka, or, di ba pag sinabi, once na tumuka na yung manok, huwag mo nang pigilan. So, once na nagsalita na yung interviewee mo, huwag mo na siyang i-interrupt. And the next one would be inquiry. After all information have been given, that's the time na pwede ka na magtanong ng mga clarifying questions. And the last one is conclusion. So after the interview, it is proper to close the interview with utmost courtesy and thanking the subject for his cooperation. So that is the ironic format. Next is rules to be observed in questioning. So if you are an interviewer, you have to you have to throw questions one at a time. So avoid implied answers. Ito yung mga ito yung mga question na nagsasuggest ka na ng sagot. Simplicity of the question. You have to formulate your questions which is direct to the point. Direct to the heart. Straight to the point. Saving faces. Avoid close-ended questions or yung mga yes or no. Next would be interrogation. For interrogation, it is a questioning of a person suspected of having committed an offense or a person who is reluctant to make full disclosure of information in his possession which is pertinent to the investigation. Usually kasi si interview, ginagamit siya sa mga witnesses and mga victims. And for interrogation, usually ginagamit to sa mga suspects. And doon sa mga tao or persons or respondents that are reluctant to divulge information or to disclose information. Si interrogator, it is a person who performs a skillful questioning o ito yung gumagawa ng interrogation. Interrogee, ito yung person or yung respondent being interrogated. Next would be purpose of interrogation. So, ba't ginagawa si interrogation? Of course, to obtain confession to the crime, to induce the suspect to make admission, to learn the facts of the crime, to learn the identity of the accomplice o yung mga kasamahan niya, to develop information which will lead to the recovery of the fruits of the crime, to discover the details of other crimes participated by the suspect. So, the last I would be instrumentation. Kasi tatlo yan. Information, interview, interrogation, and instrumentation. For instrumentation, it is also called as criminalistics or forensic science. It is the application of instruments and methods of physical science to the detection of crime, such as bullet comparison microscope for forensic ballistics, fingerprint comparator for personal identification, polygraph, machine, and the likes. So ito yung pag-i-intervene ng forensic science or criminalistic in aiding the investigator in solving the case. Next would be stages of criminal investigation. So first is, you have to identify the perpetrator. The next one is to locate and trace the whereabouts of the perpetrator. And of course, to provide evidence needed for his conviction. So first is identify the perpetrators. It is important in the first part of investigation to recognize as to who is the perpetrator of the crime. Of course, in starting an investigation, isa sa mga dapat na i-establish is yung identity ng offender or ng perpetrator. It is the mainly established as this will guide investigators as to who committed the crime. Next is methods of identification. Paano ba natin na-identify si perpetrator? So, maaari natin gamitan ng admission or confession. So, admission or confession by a suspect is a major objective of every investigation. The confession is an excellent means of identifying the criminal. From the point of view of proving guilt at the trial, a consideration that will overlap this discussion, it must be supported by other corroborative evidence. When we say corroborative evidence, yung mga additional evidence to support the confession. So, discuss muna natin yung concept of confession. Confession, it is the direct acknowledgement of guilt arising from the commission of crime. So, basta ang lagi nating tatandaan kay confession is direct acknowledgement of guilt. The declaration of an accused expressly acknowledging his guilt of the charge may be given as evidence against him. What are the types of confession? Dalawa yan. Extrajudicial confession and judicial confession. For extrajudicial confession, this is made by the suspect during the custodial investigation. While judicial confession, nangyari ang confession in an open court. The plea of guilty may be during arraignment or in any stage of the proceedings where the accused changes his plea of not guilty to guilty. So, anong pagkakaiba? Extrajudicial confession, kaya extrajudicial outside the court. So, ginawa niya yung confession niya outside the trial or outside the proceeding. While judicial confession is during the proceeding, inside an open court. Next is admission. Admission is a self-incriminatory statement by the subject falling short of an acknowledgement of guilt. It is an acknowledgement of a fact or circumstances from which guilt may be inferred. It implicates but does not incriminate. It is also an acknowledgement that a fact, action, or circumstances are true, which strongly infer or directly admit guilt, but lacks the details of the elements of the crime. Acknowledgement only some of the elements of the crime and is not tantamount to confession. Kasi si confession, direct acknowledgement of guilt. While si admission, they are just acknowledging some of the details or elements of the crime but not directly acknowledging or directly confessing na siya yung gumawa ng krimen. Next is eyewitness testimony. The idea identification is made by several objective persons who are familiar with the appearance of the accused and who personally witnessed the commission of a crime. So from the word itself, eyewitness testimony, these are testimonies from the witnesses na nakakita ng krimen. Next would be circumstantial evidence. In the absence of confession and eyewitness, the identification of a criminal may be established indirectly by proving other facts or circumstances from which either alone or in connection with other facts, the identity of the perpetrator can be inferred. So circumstantial evidence, these are evidence that relies on an inference to connect it to a conclusion of fact, such as fingerprint at the scene of a crime. So, circumstantial evidence, it is just proving other facts. So, hindi siya directly nagpo-prove doon sa conclusion of fact, but it proves other circumstances that are connected to the fact or to the accusation or to the issue. Next is identification through physical evidence. So, may dalawa yan, associative evidence and tracing evidence. For associative evidence, these are physical evidence that can identify the criminal. While yung tracing evidence, these are physical evidence that may assist in locating or tracing the suspect. So, yun yung pagkakaiba niya. Associative evidence and tracing evidence, these are both physical evidence, but itong associative evidence kasi is to identify the criminal. So, more on identification, while tracing evidence is more on locating the offender. Next is corpus delicti evidence. These are objects or substances which may be part of the body of the crime, such as the body of the victim, body of the suspect's subject, guns, knife, slug recovered from the cadaver during autopsy of body fluid, blood, fingerprints, and footprints. So ito yung mga important evidence na meron or yung mga essential evidence sa crime. So next is identification through forensic science. This method is done through the aid of the expertise of different forensic services such as DNA, fingerprint, odontology, and the like. Next is locate and trace the whereabouts of the perpetrator. This is the phase of investigation wherein after the identification of the perpetrator will lead to the location or whereabouts. Diyan napapasok si tracing evidence. In helping or aiding the investigator in tracing or locating the perpetrator. And the last one would be provide evidence needed for his conviction. So to successfully produce a conviction, investigators must remember the rules in handling evidence so as to maintain its integrity starting from the crime scene up until during the court presentation. Yun yung tinatawag natin na chain of custody. So thank you very much, and I do hope that you learned a lot for today's video discussion. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the professor and hit the notification bell for you to be updated for my next video upload. Thank you very much.